watcher, and welcome along for the ride. I'm off to visit a bijou little time machine, a portal on the past. It tells us a lot about the present, maybe gives us something to think about when we look to the future as well. So the place we're heading to is called Fawsley, right in the middle of England, in the county of Northamptonshire, which is known for many things. Two of them are historically sheep farming and hence the wool trade, and the other one is that ironstone, local dark brown ironstone. Most of the old buildings around here are made from that. You'll see, road closed. Surely not. We're just down here somewhere. Here we go. The parish church of the village of Fawsley, the church of St Mary the Virgin. There we go, sheep, check, ironstone, check. Let's go and have a look. So we know there's been a settlement of sorts here from around the 6th century at least. Those people were Anglo-Saxons, so Germanic in origin, and through the early Middle Ages they flourished here, partly due to a benign warming climate. There's an idea. The dear old English villain King John, think your Robin Hood baddie, arrived on the throne by a stroke of luck in the year 1199, and it was during his short, hectic, you might say catastrophic reign that the monks in the nearby town of Daventry, about 4 miles north of here, funded the building of this church on the site of a much older wooden framed church. And on the credit side of the kingly ledger of this highly unpopular monarch, we ought to recognise the Magna Carta as a positive achievement of sorts. Though mind you, he did have his arm twisted a bit. And the whiff of that pivotal document hangs heavy in the air. It's only a few miles east of here, in the county town of Northampton, that the pesky English barons at the time concocted their rebellious pact and marched with their army of God on London to demand change. In fact, this army of God was actually upset about the tax regime, not their eternal souls. The sweet smell of politics. However, this show of rebellion did lead directly to King John's concessionary Magna Carta, a document considered to be the foundation of constitutional monarchy, conceding that no one, not even the king, was above the law, and recognising religious rights and the right to impartial justice, rights that it granted to the people. The people. That sounds familiar. Of course, almost before the wax of the royal seal was set, both sides completely ignored all aspects of this holy pact and began fighting again immediately. However, the Magna Carta in its various versions is, as a template, considered to have influenced many foundations of modern Western democracy, such as, well, the Constitution of the United States. But what has that got to do with St Mary the Virgin, the parish church of Fawsley Village? And where is the ruddy village anyway? Oh, where were we? Ah, yes. All was tickety-boo for a couple of 100 years after King John. Then the climate cooled. Oh, make your mind up. Crops failed repeatedly, and that finest cherry on the top of everyday happiness, the Black Death, came along and decimated the population, most importantly, the working population. Ever want to spot a bit of an opportunistic downturn in the property market? The lands that included Fawsley were purchased in the year 1415 by one Sir Richard Knightley. Sir Knightley. Oh, that's just weird. Anyway, let's just call him Sir Richard. He was a successful lawyer, bless him, and a hard-nosed businessman, sheep-farming landlord. Now, the Knightleys had arrived in England with William the Conqueror in 1066 as one of his barons. Remember those fine feudal fellows that would eventually rebel against King John and his ungodly taxes? The Knightleys were an epic family line, with a heraldic coat of arms that indicates they'd been major players on the French baronic stage for at least the preceding 700 years. And it was Sir Richard Knightley descendants that began construction of the magnificent Fawsley Hall just over there, a couple of 100 yards from the church. Many of the Knightleys are interred in this wonderful little place, and the various family members are remembered with effigies and plaques. Let's take a look inside. So all well and good for another century or so, by which time the Tudors, not the Plantagenets of John's time, were the English monarchy family line of the moment, and the people were enjoying the blessed reign of one of our finest kings, dear, dear, benevolent Henry VIII, who, in between executing wives, found time to establish himself and all his heirs through his reformation and active supremacy as head of the new Church of England, simultaneously effecting the dissolution of the monasteries, and purloining all of their assets, all in the name of God, you understand. This was a massive sociological upheaval, but in which a later Knightley, Sir Edmund, played a key role. But also around this time we saw the earliest effects of enclosure, a series of progressive acts under which landowner barons appropriated the rights of commoners' access to their lands. Magna Carta, anyone? And so against this equitable social backdrop, the Knightleys decided to enclose their lands, which meant moving from tenanted arable farming, their old passion sheep farming. In the process, turfing out the local peasantry whose families had toiled here for the best part of 1,000 years, and completely demolishing their village in order to improve the outlook from Fawsley Hall and make room for more sheep. Well, that's the village mystery sorted. Happy day. Well, happy-ish. And how lovely and novel to have the French, England's oldest enemy, turfing out the Germans, national heritage of our present royal family, right here in the middle of England. Anyway, the Knightleys spared our time machine church not for any sentimental, aesthetic or religious reasons, but for historical land grant reasons. It wasn't part of their estate. These Knightleys were a family with a strong social and political connection set, always lurking about just a bit behind the scenes, shakers and movers, variously knighted by the Kings Henry VII and VIII. Queen Elizabeth I stayed here as a guest at Fawsley Hall, and King Charles I hunted in the grounds of the estate before he completely lost his head. And you know what? The Knightleys did very well, thank you very much, for centuries to come. They were interwoven by marriage with many leading local families of later English history, including the Spencers, think Winston Churchill and Lady Diana, and also the Seymours of Henry VIII connection. Are you keeping up? Well, if you are, you might well be asking whether there's a point to all of this piffle. Okay, let's hit the fast-forward button on our little time machine to arrive in the very early 17th century. And here, at the remarkably durable Fawsley Church of England church, now starkly isolated within the Knightley estate, our resident cleric was called Lawrence. His Christian name, that is. His ancestral family home, funded by, guess what? Yep, the wool trade, was not Fawsley Hall, but a slightly more modest but still very splendid pile at Sulgrave Manor, about 10 miles south of here. And the Reverend Lawrence was to become, in the fullness of time, ancestor of a chap called George, and George was to make a bit of a name for himself, not in the clergy and not 10 miles south of here at Sulgrave, but 3,500 miles to the west, because the family eventually sold Sulgrave Manor, and 3 of Lawrence's children emigrated to Virginia in 1656. You see, This family was the Washingtons, and our local Reverend Lawrence Washington was the paternal great-great-grandfather of George Washington, who apparently was a name of some interest in something called the United States, though we English don't like to talk about it too much. But whilst his Virginia-bound descendants were to thrive, the Reverend Lawrence Washington, after a sparkling academic and clerical career, fell foul of political developments in English Civil War and died in abject poverty, leaving no estate worthy of a will. No estate, but quite a legacy. This is the coat of arms of the Washington family, with perhaps more than just a hint of stars and stripes about it. It also appears in these stained glass windows, brazenly nicked from Solgrave Manor down the road by some well-meaning person, probably half-inched by one of the Knightleys, I'll wager. They were lawyers, don't forget. So many interwoven threads, twists and flukes. Gold from mud, dust from glory. Chaos, tragedy and triumph. So many what-ifs in this patchwork quilt of name-dropped history oozing from the iron memory banks of these holy ancient stones. Let's play a what-if. Okay, well, Henry VIII's fabulous marital and religious notoriety principally derived from his desperate craving for a male heir. Now, Henry and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, actually had 3 sons, but none of them survived beyond very early infancy. What if just one of them had? Henry IX, no doubt. Royal heir and bloodline continuity sorted. No divorce required. Catherine was an excellent queen, intelligent, highly educated and an accomplished stateswoman. And they were married for 24 years, remember, so clearly had some kind of foundational basis to their marriage. It wasn't just a convenience. Even if Henry had been tempted into later dalliances anyway. Surely not. They wouldn't have merited the grief of divorce and the terror of excommunication. So there would have been no need for a Church of England. So our old friend Lawrence Washington, when adopting his holy orders, would have become Father Washington, a Catholic priest, who would, of course, have been celibate. And as an extra little twist, those Pilgrim Fathers that Lawrence's offspring eventually went to join in the dear old US of A left England precisely because of the oppression of the Church of England. In its absence, and perhaps with Magna Carta's purported religious freedoms, albeit heavily and benignly reinterpreted and more widely applied, this was no Bill of Rights. But the Mayflower might never have sailed. History, the fickle toss of a mischievous coin. And so, bringing the story of this enchanting, still consecrated, magical little time machine into the 21st century, what positive progress can we report? Well, we find that the most significant recent development of note is that just a few years ago, a highly educated, considerate, diverse and responsible community included a criminal gang that in the dead of a winter's night tore the roof from this ancient house of prayer in order to sell its blessed protective copper in return for a small handful of silver. 30 pieces thereof, no doubt. The church interior and its ancient oak roof substructure were left brutally exposed to the elements for some time and suffered serious damage, all for the sake of a weekend's beer money for the lads. Welcome, welcome everyone, to the new age of primeval endarkenment and a future in which the gross value of the past is never more than its discounted black market scrap value in the present. Of course, the good and the honourable came to the rescue, anonymously as always. They came silently from their quiet places. No fuss, no placards, no protests, no demands. They simply brought genuine care, social compassion, voluntary charitable contribution, and concern for the important things like conservation of national heritage and respect for it, and a belief, a determined belief, a faith, if you will, in humanity, and humankind in its past, in its present, and in its future. Let's sit down for a bit, catch a breath. You know, sat here you can almost sense the presence of that now absent evicted village community. It persists in the gossamer gasp of ghosts on the breeze, and in the ethereal rusted essence of its remnant ironstone edifice of faith. And you can't help feeling that we live in times that are crying out for, well, some faith. Faith in something, anything. An intimate personal faith that provides a value basis, a guiding moral yardstick, faith founded in a sense of something considered graceful, something right, a force for good. That which is inescapably due north on the moral compass. I'm not talking about organised religion, mantras, doctrines, rituals. I'm talking about faith. Faith. That which glows reassuringly when you have need to look into the deepest, darkest part of your own heart and ask the question of yourself and your actions. Why? That faith thing seems to be missing these days, and I don't just mean among the criminal gangs of rogues. But where is the strength of this faith to be found as we tumble on down our ever-steepening, morally devoid, craven scree slope of materialism on demand, desperately clinging to our iPhones so as not to miss anything trending, whilst the very humanity is scratched and scraped from our souls by the granite shards of greed? Where? Well, we certainly find it in the company of the quiet people who restored this church after its insane, inane, profane desecration. If only we could find them, but they slipped quietly away back to their places of calm, balanced reason, born of their inner faith and moral conviction. Or perhaps we might find it here, right now, caught sweetly in the past, with all its comfortable, familiar scars, aches, warts, and musty, earthy smells. Tombstones pickled in essence of Yewberry. Here where the angst, pain, and remorse of mortality are done with, and hope is unburdened of pulsing, gasping, trembling meat to float free and bloom. Here among the fantastic, lichen-encrusted memorials, communing with the faithful dead, who no longer have need of the faith they owned, cherished, and to which they once so dearly clung. Perhaps, just perhaps, they might be so kind to offer their surplus faith to us, the remnant living, who have so desperate a need of it today. Perhaps they might offer it in return for a song. Funny you should say that. As it so happens, I brought a tiny little stringed friend along for the ride out to a tiny little time machine today. Thanks for joining us. Go peacefully and with an inner smile. Oh, and with some faith. Drop a cold lint rope, ease my troubled brow, turn my face to the clear light shine, prop my soul with hope. Please, somehow I need some faith in this needing time. Hold a candle proud, lest to state my case, plant my flag today midst this earthly grime, hymnal spangled loud, caress my teared face, need some faith in this needing time. No need for big brand labels on this personal cross, My sanctuary enabled child Satan's loss. With the seed of evil's wraith, help me draw the line. Need some faith in this needing time. Graced by Agabus' blessings, Wednesday's ash, lay me sweetly pray, 'neath avenued lime. Graced by Lazarus' dressings, and the scourging's lash. Need some faith in this needing time. Need some faith.